Welcome to this week's episode of the Aspire to Be podcast. I'm your host, Julie Cropp Gareleck. Sometimes in life and in business, we all need someone to help us get out of our own way. Well, my guest today, Diana Murphy, is an executive coach working with entrepreneurs and leaders to break through all of the noise. Her amazing tuition and her genuine desire to help her clients thrive has been the force behind her success for the last 10 years. Diana started her early career in medical and pharmaceutical sales, landed a position with Gallup, built her family, raised 2 boys, and at the age of 55, took the leap to start her own business. Diana, I have always valued your perspective and the work that you've done, and I look forward to sharing this conversation with our listeners. Welcome to Aspire to Be.
I am so honored to be here today. Our relationship has gone through the years. We actually had conversations before COVID.
Yes, we did.
Really a friendship. And it's just an honor to be part of what you're creating here.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, every conversation I've had with you, I've walked away feeling better about myself, better about my direction, even if it was just lunch.
Yes, exactly. Oh,
So-
lunch or wine. Yes.
Exactly. But today we're really going to dig into not just the work that you do, but the results of the work that you do and how that impacts these executives and entrepreneurs. So I want to start with the beginning. I know you're rooted in Chicago.
Yes.
You took a trip to the Big Apple, worked there, and then
Yes.
made it back to the Midwest, and now you're anchored here in Atlanta.
Yes.
So tell me about the early days.
The early days, I met my husband at the time at University of Colorado. It was my safety school. And my mom was just dying for me to go there. And it's wild that that's what turned out. But it was a great, I was a really type A, great student. And what was really good for me is that I was in a softer environment. It wasn't a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
So I grew up a lot. I grew up a lot being on semester at sea my junior year, traveling around the
that sounds
world.
fun.
And so I know from those days that I started, like I went into marketing, but what I really knew is I wanted to be on the ground and in sales. So I've always had an adience to that type of career.
Oh,
So that
that's
was where I started.
fantastic. Well, you started there, and then I know that you were actually you landed a job with the Gallup organization, and you really were working on developing the culture for the leaders that were there, correct?
Absolutely. So some of my experiences of wanting to be a manager in pharmaceuticals was starting to be that seed of understanding there was a better way to help manage people and help people to grow. I could see it in the way I was being managed in a sales rep, the way my numbers were being counted, the way I was being perceived.
Ah, interesting.
And so when my husband at the time he went there first in a sales role, and I was introduced to the company all based on the culture of focusing on strengths and positive psychology.
Wow.
I was like, I want to be here too.
Yeah.
So when the opportunity came for me to come in, I was initially in a sales role and quickly was able to be a part of the in-depth interviewing center. And so I was really managing a gorgeous group of individuals that were managing in-depth interviews with people that were really interviewing for jobs for our clients, and had a really great experience working with that group of people.
Well, I can imagine. And did that experience lend itself to sort of growing into your business that you have now? Was that sort of an early stepping stone that maybe you weren't aware of at the time?
Yeah, wasn't aware of at the time.
Yeah.
We do not understand, and I think this would be something for the audience. Take a lot of time to look back at what you love doing, what lit you up, because it informed the path. I had a drive from the beginning at Gallup to be a part of people understanding their brilliance and being able to step into that. And, Gallup Strengths Finder, I was literally 2 desks away from Don Clifton as he started that research and that work. We were actually a company that bought Gallup. So I was part of a small firm that really knew that they wanted to be involved in a bigger way of doing business. And so we bought the Gallup organization from the Gallup Sons. And we were an employee-owned company from the beginning.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so it was entrepreneurial.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yes.
But even just to have had that experience and to be on the ground as that approach to interviewing and focusing on strengths, I do think that, and I know in my own experience, I talk about it a lot in my book, is that there wasn't a lot of focus on that sort of in the 2010s or in the early 2000s. And I think we sort of got lost a little bit in some of the the positivity and management styles. Again, I think not that it wasn't a focus. I just think that as a lot of new businesses started,
Yes.
they had not been exposed to that before. But it's interesting that that sort of inspired or lit a flame inside of
Oh,
you
it
for
did.
what could come. So at the age of 55, you're
Yes.
2 boys out of the house and grown, and you decide to start your own business.
Yes.
Talk about
So no coach understands, unless they're in the right school or area of learning, that one of the biggest parts of becoming a coach is actually creating a business so that you can. I am so blessed with the skills and the way that I operate in the world. Yes, I was at home with my kids, but I was co-president of the Parents Association. I ran the
You were
Sally
very
Foster
busy.
campaign, and everybody was like, whoa. And so being like really not belittling those experiences and then realizing that I was willing to do that whole identity shift of becoming a business owner so that I could be a coach.
Oh, it's fantastic. I
It
mean,
is.
what a
It was a
leap.
gorgeous, gorgeous now
Yeah.
journey.
Probably not so
in
much
the
in the
grit. I would
beginning.
say 7 to 8 years ago, those early years
Yeah.
are really tough, and it was all the things that you and I talk about as the themes behind the things that I've grown through is how I help my clients, imposter syndrome, getting frozen, all the things. But I would never give up that journey, whether that was what informed my coaching practice or not, because you never learn more about yourself than when you start a business or a new venture.
Well, as you know, I've written Dare to Become, which is my first book that will come out. And that was really all of the things that I had learned working for my parents' business, working in corporate, finding things I didn't like, and then having enough wherewithal to invest in myself. And so I know how scary that can be. And even though you were probably ready for the challenge, make no mistake, it's not easy, it's not simple,
not.
and sometimes it's ugly.
Yeah,
Just for a
it
little
is.
while.
There's some grit in the background, and I think that's where coaching, and I know we'll get into this, but this for the audience, this is where leaders are so disoriented. And it is a natural way that our brain and tries to protect us from something new and big. And this is the process of just becoming more authentic and more yourself.
No, it's great. And we are going to dig into that too. And I know one of the things you and I have talked about too is that coaching has gotten a bad rap, right? It's the elephant in the room, if you will. Talk to me a little bit about if there was a pivotal moment for you that made you sort of decide to go down this authentic, values-based route, because I know not every coach has the same methodology as you do.
I think it's this journey of, in my own path, of honoring what I knew was right for my practice. But being taught from the outside that scaling at all costs and having your niche always so well defined and crafted, and marketing, and now all those things are so valuable. Being clear in your messaging no matter what your business is. But what was happening is I was being taught to do things in a way that was rubbing against my integrity.
Didn't feel right.
It did not feel right. And when we get in a space of dishonoring our values and our integrity and our uniqueness too,
Yes.
we will not be as good at what we're doing. Doing something a way that someone else has done. Many coaches think that they have gone through a gorgeous process themselves. There is so much value to that, but without the right tools and creating a lot of emotional safety, that is not coaching.
Yeah.
The client absolutely has the answers.
Yes.
And I think that's where executive coaching or this canned coaching, I'm going to teach you these 3 things. Yes. If there's methods, if there's you just can hear from that coach that those are the 3 things that's fabulous.
Sure.
But safe coaching will come from someone that honors you as client as being the master of your life. And when that is overridden or made to feel small, and it's done very unintentionally. These are subconscious patterns that all of us have because we're humans and have all been raised in different households and cultures. So I am confident because of the work I've done myself. And I think that this is, if the audience is looking to coaching or is curious about this, be with coaches that do a lot of their own self-work, that they
Yeah.
talk about their own journey a lot. So
Right.
you know that they're more aware. We're not perfect. We're not better than. We don't know all the answers, but that groundedness comes from doing our own work.
Well, and I think that attributes a lot to the success that you've had, because I know from my own experience, while I've not considered coaching for my own business, when I went to write the book, I knew that I needed a book coach to hold me accountable. And really what I thought I was getting was a project manager. I was like, they're going to keep me on time and task. It's going to be so great. They're going to manage me. And really what I ended up getting, I worked with Rick Wolf, who is an American author himself. He was a former professional baseball player and coach. He had his own radio show. But what I got out of my experience with him every week was so profound, in that he believed in what I was doing, but he also showed me how to bring out the best in my writing so that I could write this book. And I think in the end, I look back and go, that was interesting. Because again, he was a book coach and he did his
Yes.
job very well, but he was very authentic in his approach. He was very easy to talk to, but he also had a lot of knowledge, right? His background in sports psychology, his work,
Oh, the
books
tools that
he's
he
written,
brought
the
to
tools
the
that he had made him
conversations. Yeah.
flawless. And I
Yeah.
didn't even know he was doing it. So it was even better, right?
Yes, the best experts, we talked about this, the
Yes.
best experts have imbued great coaching in their
Yes.
work. And it's from being insightful and really honoring holding the space for that client, holding the space for your nervousness in this big new project,
Yep.
but also holding the space for what you really wanted to get done.
Yeah.
I've been asked to be an accountability coach many times over, and this
Yep.
is my answer.
Yeah.
I will only be accountable to making sure that you're not beating yourself up,
Right.
that you are like not really looking at the nuance of that grace towards self while you do this growth, which is
Grace
the big
towards
deal,
self. Yeah.
and honoring the vision that you want to take. And that's what he did for you. He
Yes.
dug in and knew
did.
you wanted to bring life to this book, but
did.
also he was able to dig into your genius and all these experiences that your brain is like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
True. But you had this vast knowledge that was brought to the forefront.
Oh, and
that.
it will forever
And that should be part of every coaching experience.
Well, and again, and until I'd had that, I don't think I could fully understand.
Yeah.
And again, I think we could both agree there are some great coaches, and there are also some coaches that aren't as authentic
Yes.
and aren't necessarily rooted in those values of honoring the client and honoring it. And as CEOs and leaders and entrepreneurs, we tend to not be a bunch that takes direction very well. So I'm sure
Right.
in your work, you can't just have these three things, because for each individual, I would imagine that they're a variation of those three things or those four things that they're finding.
It is such an individual. And the way that I have created my practice is making sure I'm always exploring the tools that I want to bring to the forefront. And I do that through my own experience by engaging with different coaches.
Yeah.
But it's also this space where you dig in and really start seeing the patterns in the person. Because if we solve it for the fight they had with their husband or wife that morning or child, if we solve for that hard moment, we're going to be a better manager. We're going to be more grounded when we're with a client. And so it's honoring the real vision that where this client wants to go, but honoring and reminding them who they really, really are. It's really, coaching is helping you remember how brilliant you are.
Oh, it's such a great statement. And I think, as you've worked with, I'm sure various levels of entrepreneurs, various levels of executives and leaders, there have to be, or maybe you've found in your work that there's a handful of things that we all suffer from, right? We're all maybe suffering from or struggling with, or we all find ourselves, in a similar place. What would you say? I know we've talked about a little bit, and you mentioned it earlier, this idea of imposter syndrome, which I think is the new coin phrase for fear,
Yes. We have not been taught in our world, in our culture, to honor our emotional experience. And I remember being asked on a business owners podcast, and I was asked, do some of your clients, Diana, experience imposter syndrome. And I've been coaching type A folk of all levels. I mean, all levels of entrepreneurs, all levels of business owners and middle management leaders. And I will tell you, there is not one person that has not experienced it, because growth kind of freaks our brain out.
Yes.
And that's the fear component. And imposter syndrome is getting into a new space and your brain feeling like, helping you feel like you're jumping off a cliff.
Yes. And being okay to jump off the cliff.
And now, what I feel like coaching or good mentorship, I've always made this analogy because I coach people that are like selling their businesses or starting a new business, this very raw new space. Well, there's a cliff. Yes, there's a cliff. A coach, a good mentor is that shelf underneath. It's like so that you can make the leaps. But again, it's honoring the fear. I have a story about, I think my biggest mindset bump through this and being able to understand it was that when I finally was coached that it was normal to be worried. It was normal to be upset. It was, I thought all the people that were ahead of me and doing well in their coaching practices were experiencing zero of that.
That's what we tell ourselves, right?
So honoring the experience of it is allowing it, which actually gives our soul, our heart, like a distancing from the emotional experience. So the fear is real, but if we're like, oh yeah, here I am, this is normal. What does this feel like in my body? Taking a deep breath through it and going, and what also is here? What is my intention in this moment? And so whether it's the intention to write 100 words that morning, or whether it's the intention to go into a really difficult situation, the more we start trusting again ourselves in those hard moments, that's the beauty. Well, that's the beauty of moving from imposter syndrome to, I am aware I'm feeling fear, disappointment, guilt, anger, all of the things. None of us have told us how to hold those and move through those.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you put a bunch of entrepreneurs in a room together, 9 out of 10 will tell you that they don't have it or they don't feel it.
Right, because we think we're not supposed to be successful.
Exactly.
It is the biggest lie.
But I always find, and I find now that I pay attention to this, is that anytime growth is coming or there's something new coming, and I think that I just don't like change, or I don't like to pivot, but the reality is it's hard, right? And it's that fear of like, well, what if the step that we're taking is the wrong one? What if I've invested in the wrong areas? And I've just sort of gotten to the point where I'm like, well, I've been at this long enough to know, right, that if it doesn't work out, it's going to be okay. And I think that's like why even when I wrote my book, it was like vulnerable and hard, and why would I do this? And what are the people going to say? I'll be trolled. Then I just thought, let them. What else can I do, right? If this is what I want to do and this is my intention with the book, then that intention will come forward. And for the people who don't like it, well.
Yeah. And it's building that self-trust that you're knowing your gut check on what you want to say, even though it's difficult and may have a ripple effect. Going through those conversations with guidance is just, it is some of the most powerful work.
I can imagine. I mean, you get to see someone that's kind of stuck in that place, and then you get to see them sort of get to the next threshold once they honor it and accept it, right? But I know there are other areas that they probably struggle with too, and I know one of the things that resonated when we had talked about this before was that internal conversation that we have with ourselves. Oh, my word.
I am doing some work through this. So what happens when you allow emotion and you also allow this experience is, as a coach, I will see patterns. I will see what's going on behind the scenes. And those patterns were set up as children to survive or do well. We all have a lot of subconscious wiring that we can't see. Right. So again, the power of a coach is being able to see some of that and kind of deflate the power of it and give the client an opportunity, and I do this in my own work, to act in intention instead of reacting to the fear. But one thing I've been really digging deep and studying is the internal conversations that my clients have. And I was sharing this with my coach, and she said, Diana, I think you're actually solving this whole issue that we think is with two people is gaslighting. I'm literally digging into the definition and realizing that we become our own worst enemy. We are not our biggest fan. And some of this is from protection. Like we may have had children or, have had to protect ourselves. And so we kind of like make ourselves small so we don't get in trouble or whatever it might be. But if the viewers can understand, like, if you can be aware of your own internal conversation and honor what you're proud of instead of like, what did I do wrong this week? It's asking different questions. It's listen to the definition of gaslighting. Emotional manipulation in which the gaslighter, which is our judge voice, tries to convince you that you are misremembering, misunderstanding, or misinterpreting your own behavior and motivations. Let me give you an example. Friday afternoon, you just had a horrible conversation with a client.
Yeah.
And you will say to anyone around you that you had the worst week ever. That moment, that's a lie. Because you may have signed 2 of your biggest clients on Tuesday, had one of the most meaningful dinners with your family on Wednesday.
Yes.
And that's what our brain tests to us. So it's helping to gather information and to point our brain to really turning to gathering positive, more life-giving information that's going on in our lives versus the negative.
So how do you do that, though? I mean, how do you stop? How do you stop that? Because I'm guilty. I think we're all guilty of that on some level, whether it's a big moment or whether it's a small moment. I know, I could get derailed by a single email that I get at midnight from a client that's not appropriate, right? And I let that spin out and be non-productive, you know, as I go
So
forward.
what if I think it is this nuance of honoring it's normal and not judge that you had that emotional experience.
Yeah.
Take a breath and ask what else is true.
That's a good point.
Because our brain is saying, you've done it wrong, what else is wrong? And you can go in this spiral that the brain will capture everything you've done wrong. So it's being the manager of our own minds and being really graceful towards ourselves and stopping that by asking a better questions. Our brain asks really bad questions or creates us like this hypervigilance in our lives.
Yes.
And it was there for a purpose at one time. Now it's like, is this serving me now?
It's so interesting you say that because it's funny. I could tell you every single thing I have ever done wrong in any work environment, as a child, as a teenager, as a young 20-something, I could tell you every single thing that I've done wrong.
Yes.
But I tend to forget what I've done right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's funny that you say, ask the question differently, right? And I think for those of our listeners, hopefully this is resonating because we are our biggest, like we're gaslighting ourselves.
So can we just and what a lot of clients will do is jump to, that's toxic positivity.
Right.
When you jump to too positive but what am I doing great?
Right.
You can't even get there in that moment, right?
Yes.
But what else might be true here? What else can we do? And so it's honoring the moment for ourselves, being really graceful. Like, of course I got triggered. That was a bad conversation. And energetically, like you're feeling either the emotions of the other person, you're feeling like you failed them. Yeah. Breathing through and going, okay, what do I really want to do with this here? And talking to someone else like, wait, he said this. Is this something you're seeing in me? And really allowing your work partner or someone that you know is going to tell you the truth, and a coach will tell you the truth, and in a way that's more graceful than you ever will to yourself.
That's true.
So that's why someone outside, a trusted advisor is so important, or a guide or guidance, from a coach.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine in the early years if I do think back, like, would I have benefited from it? And I probably would.
All of us would.
We all would, because I think sometimes just having an unbiased party on the outside that's forcing us to be honest with ourselves and telling the truth, which goes against, all of the protection mechanisms we have in place. I wonder how much more successful we all could be, right?
I don't know. There's something in me when I meet people that I never want to make the promise that it's going to be faster, but it usually is.
Right.
I never want to make the promise that more money is coming if they're just diligent new business owners.
Sure.
Because it does when they get onto themselves of the things that are slowing them down. Yeah. But what is so true is in these moments where the perseverance and you're going to get it done. But what if you could get it done with less suffering?
Right.
There's
things
like,
I
this
wish I
is
knew.
right. Like I suffered in year 2 to 3
Yeah.
becoming, right, like working really hard to become a revenue, like
Yep.
really making money. So my
Yeah.
family I could pay for the coaching I wanted. I could,
Do
you know,
what you-
pay for the trips to my masterminds and
Yeah.
all the things that I wanted to do. But I had to be with myself in that really ugly way of shutting down and procrastinating. The email I would start writing on Monday or podcast on Tuesday that never got done till Friday.
Yeah.
And I had to be gentle and kind and get through the grit. But now I do that with less suffering. I'm able to drop into a confident space that is more life-giving. And now it just serves me in all the spaces. That's what's so wild. Like it served me in my transitions, in my relationships and other things. So it's just
amazing,
it's a
right?
gorgeous, coaching and self-coaching are a gorgeous, gorgeous tool.
No, it's great because it does remind me of I remember when I started my business, and my husband's very successful and had been for years before I started mine. And, you know, I would get a lot of questions of like, oh, why aren't you just why don't you just be a stay-at-home mom? Why don't you, well, your husband, you don't need to work, do you? And here I was fighting it. And I remember second guessing myself and going, gosh, do they really think I'm an idiot? Like I just, that
Isn't
I
it
don't,
fascinating to go to that thought? And all they
right?
were challenging is the values and the culture of being married and being home with kids.
Exactly.
And,
Yes.
that is deeply rooted also. And so understanding that you honored,
I
despite
did.
that,
I
you
did.
honored how you're wired and what you really wanted to
Oh,
bring to the world.
absolutely.
Thank
And
God.
well, and not only did I persevere through that, like I didn't take a penny from my husband, I didn't take a penny from
Yeah.
anyone, and I proved to myself,
Yeah. Yes.
that I could do it. And so at the end of the day, I could look back and say this was something that I built, much like you built yours, right?
Yes.
Coming out of a time where you weren't sure, and it's hard,
Yeah.
but to get through it, I think you look back and you're stronger for it. And so I still have the negative conversation, but
Which is human.
which is human.
Can we just normalize that? That is one of the
Right.
first things I do with clients is
Yeah.
normalize that conversation so it loses its power.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really is a great, great tool.
It's like a great equalizer too,
Yeah.
right? We're all human at
Yes.
the end of the day.
Oh, this morning I was fretting over this, and we just spoke on Friday, and it was one of the most gorgeous conversations. And I was like,
Exactly.
"Oh, I'm humaning again."
Yes, I human all the time.
We're humaning all the time, whether we like it or not, and we
Yeah.
don't like it sometimes.
No, we
like we really
don't.
don't. We resist our natural, normal human experience, and and we're in a culture now, and you're seeing this by even an awareness that there are some things wrong in the way that coaching has been sold and
Yes.
promoted than
Yes.
the actual coaching itself.
Yeah.
There are bad therapists. There are great therapists. There are good car salesmen. There are bad car
Exactly.
salesmen.
Yep.
But bringing to, the world, like your experience of seeing how that has helped you and
yeah.
bring your book to the world. I know we are hearing more nuance from you in this book because you had that right coach. It's gorgeous.
Absolutely. I mean, and it was funny that, like I said, I didn't even know it was happening as it was happening. And that's what made him
Yeah.
actually one of the best, right? That's why people, wanted him to be their book,
Yeah.
coach, because
Yeah.
he knew how to do that. But I think what he also did was he celebrated a lot of the positive too, right? Like he didn't allow me to have the negative.
And that's retraining
conversation.
the brain. That is rewiring.
Yes.
That's how we rewire. We don't do it like we were talking before.
Yeah.
Push through, and now I'm great and I don't experience fear.
Exactly right.
It's like I'm in fear. Oh, these are the thoughts that are creating that fear. Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What is another way to think about this? And we
Exactly.
literally will jump to, I don't now. I might procrastinate recording my podcast, but I will not be nervous recording my podcast ever
I still
again.
get nervous. Oh my gosh.
But yes, but this is growth. This is aspiring to grow.
Yeah, that's
It
true.
is not a perfect process.
Right.
And the nitty gritty is also when others are given permission to be in their growth process.
No, it's true.
And that's what you're doing.
Well, and would you say that, so if we're able to conquer the imposter syndrome, or at least
Yes.
sidestep it, and if we're able to stop the internal conversation from being so negative, what is something else that we run into? Is there another stage to it where
I think it's the patterning. I coach people around their intention with me is usually hiring for their leadership and their corporate role or their business
Yep.
work. But if they're attracted to my work, they also know that I create safe space for the personal life. You know,
Yeah.
I don't split them in two, but our world has asked us to split them in two.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So I have had people go through losing a parent, going through a really difficult divorce. And as I help that client, I'll use this example, to stop people pleasing and being like really not dishonoring their own needs
Yeah.
in a personal relationship. Guess what happens in a relationship as a manager when the leader, the team leader, the CEO is not honoring
Yeah.
their knowing and not honoring, and they know now how to speak up differently.
Yep.
And so the patterns that we have been taught or ingrained in us are so subconscious. And to have someone see them, and so I would see it, I was seeing it show up in as a
lot.
unified thing, because
Yeah.
this person's a human.
Yep.
And she could not see how it was relating into, but I'm watching her. Why am I changing two big parts of my life at once? And it was because she was healing from some patterns that were really harming her.
Yeah.
Absolute genius as a leader. I mean,
Yeah.
this is high level strategy, long sales cycle. She is very unique and high, just brilliant. Well, that was getting tamped down by a pattern that kept her safe at one part of her life and now was no longer serving her.
Gosh, what a great point.
It
was keeping her safe
yes,
for something that no longer served her.
And if
Interesting.
if there's any advice, we're talking a lot about, engaging and coaching.
Yeah.
Honor your intuition in that onboarding call. If it does not feel right,
Yep.
don't give yourself time. Now, your own imposter syndrome could be saying no to the coaching.
Right.
That
Could be
happens.
saying
There
no
are
to the
people that
coaching,
say
but not to the
no
coach.
to me that
Right.
I know I could help.
Sure.
But that means that person is, if they cannot create the trust in themselves yet to make that decision,
Yeah.
I can't convince them that I'm safe for them.
Yeah.
They need to feel that within themselves at some level so that we can have that conversation.
Well, and I think that's so important for our listeners to understand too, is that when you do meet with a coach, right, whether it's you or another
Yes.
coach,
Yes, each one finds it. There's no bigger joy than someone
yeah.
finding their own coach, even if it's not me. I mean,
Right. Well,
seriously,
well,
I
and-
can't coach 100 people.
I mean, well, you could, but
Over, yes.
yeah. But I mean, it has to be something, and we talk about this, I think, as women, sometimes I talk about it a lot, as my gut is never wrong. It's never failed me. And that is one thing that I am innately insightful about. Like, I can feel it, I can read it. And I think that when people are looking, if it doesn't feel
Yes.
right, and not that it feels vulnerable because
Yes.
you are reaching out
Right,
for a coach,
right.
but rather that if that person doesn't make you feel, as you mentioned, safe, because
Yeah.
this is vulnerable work.
Yes.
You're not talking about, hey, here's how you can get people to be 5% more productive, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you are really digging into the psychology, the conversations, the emotions that come with running a company or operating at a high level. And so if you're with somebody that doesn't understand or can protect that,
Yeah.
that can be very difficult for people
and they
to
may not be
overcome.
ready until they have some of that agency. It may be
Yeah.
time that they're so vulnerable or going through something so deep that a therapist is the great launch point.
Yeah.
I have coached people that a lot of my clients are in therapy, or
Yeah.
there are times that I refer that.
Sure.
But it's that agency of your intuition, which has been, like, you brought this up at the very beginning, right? That this personal development work has not been highly regarded. Focusing on people's talents and
Yeah.
their own uniqueness has not been really honored in our culture. And now it's screaming to get out, because that is the power. Is having,
Absolutely.
you've learned it by running a diverse team, having the right people in the right positions.
Yeah.
And that is creating emotional safety in a work environment so that that can be illuminated.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
I'd
whether
worked
it's in a coaching conversation or whether it's hiring manager,
Yeah.
really make sure you can be emotionally safe with that person, or you cannot be your full self.
Well, and making sure that, because I think I've seen it in organizations that I've worked with before that didn't have the best interests necessarily,
Yes.
and didn't provide a safe environment for folks, to work and thrive. Having worked in those, and then certainly having stepped outside, it's always been my goal to not become that environment, because it was
Yes.
so jarring, but it fit all of the norms, right?
Right.
Oh, but this is just the way things
Right.
are. Oh, Julie,
Right.
it's been like this for 20 years, Julie. And I remember when I was talking with my book coach about the chapters where we get to talk about adversity, and he's like, no, this isn't going on. This was just 20 years ago. Surely we've done better than that. And I said, Rick, no, we haven't.
That's what I thought when I came back at 55.
Right? And
I
isn't that
really
crazy?
thought that. But we are we are at a very opportune moment to really, after the pandemic, we are just beginning to heal.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like we are at a moment that's seeking people that can help us heal. Yoga, breath work, like
Exactly.
it's the woo-woo stuff just as much as it is
know.
mindset and all this. This is an opportunity for us to really heal in our humanness, because that's where the power of growth is.
And do the work, right?
And do the work.
Do the work to get ourselves to a place that allows us to be more successful where we are. So as listeners, I mean, obviously they've listened to this conversation. We've covered a lot. I mean, what are some of the key nuggets or areas of advice that you want our listeners to walk away with today? So, I know we've talked about all of the things. Coaching gets a bad rap, finding the right coach, listening to your intuition. But what are the things that folks can literally walk away with today and take action on, or really try to start doing the work?
Yes.
Whether they're with a coach or not.
Yeah. So, like, even when you were starting to talk about the managers, like, this is the way it's always been. If that manager or someone even working for them can do this work in the little moments, it's honoring your emotional experience.
Yeah.
Start describing it when it happens to you. It helps us distance when we watch what's going on for ourselves and say, what emotion am I feeling? Am I just is it pressure here? Is it something in my gut? Just starting to describe it helps it to dissipate.
That's interesting.
Breathe slowly. Honor what is going on for you in that moment. It can be the 5 minutes before you walk into a really tough meeting or in the middle of grounding a conversation that is really getting emotionally high, and just go, okay.
Yep.
And just honoring our bodies we're going to start learning. I'm just beginning to learn that my body is actually the way I can heal and be more present. And again, because that's where our knowing is. That's where we know what to say next. We know we can honor intuition. But for those that are just starting to want to be more aware, when we emotionally regulate ourselves, I don't care who you are, we bring something really great to that conversation. We can actually help our boss calm down. Again, awareness, number 2. Awareness is your power tool.
Yeah.
So honor what you're thinking in fear. What am I thinking? Write it all down. When you watch what is going on in your mind, you have agency to change it and shift it. What am I thinking here? Can I honor that I'm afraid because I'm doing something new? Can I be kind to myself?
That's great. It's so.
And what are my intentions? What do I really, you are doing this work in the real, you honored your intentions of birthing a book. That took that nitty gritty
It was
work.
hard. Yeah.
And even though it was hard, though,
It was actually hard emotionally.
Yes,
too.
it is.
Very
That is an
hard.
emotional repatterning. It's honoring all the emotions of being more vulnerable but would you give it up for anything at this point?
No, but it was far more emotional and vulnerable than I had thought.
Yes.
And it wasn't even the stories of adversity that pulled that from me. I think it was along the entire journey. It was much harder emotionally than I thought. The stories are there, right?
Yeah,
I had many
yeah.
stories to tell. I told some of them, not all of them, but so I do think that because of the work that Rick was doing, he was forcing me to acknowledge it, see it from my own eyes, and then be able to kind of spin it out into the book.
Being with ourselves in the present, we think it's going to take a long time, and coaching conversations help vet it out and bring the awareness to a very high level. But even in the moment, if you just honor, it's I'm afraid here. Yeah. Natural. Right. I'm a human.
Or I'm nervous that this podcast won't go well. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
We both
That's
took a deep
we
breath.
both did it,
Yes,
right?
we did.
But then honoring what I do with a lot of clients before they go into a really important conversation or situation, whatever it might be, it's but what are your intentions? And that's honoring the third point. It's honoring your intuition. What is your gut saying here? And what you started honoring is trusting that as in business, what you've done with your business, there's no way that we can be successful if we don't honor it.
Right.
So you have evidence that it works.
Yes.
And it's honoring that trust in new situations.
Yeah.
I dishonored my knowing and some of the ways that I was doing life in my marriage. And I look back, my whole journey of healing from that, it was a very face-forward move on both our parts.
Sure.
was my biggest trouble was that I was judging myself for dishonoring my knowing and not moving quicker out of it. And I got to tell you that the gorgeous journey of being undergirded as a coach, because I was coached all those years, I was able to walk away in love and grace towards my ex-husband in a way that I never thought was possible.
Well, and it's because you did the work along the way, right? And
I was
think,
undergirded with so much, but again, look at the honoring my knowing. Now I trust my knowing at a level I never knew was possible.
well, and I do think that that's what's allowed you to be as successful as you've been for your clients is that, again, we wouldn't hire a financial planner who's broke, right?
Exactly.
We don't want to
Or
hire,
hasn't
right?
honored their own money stories and that
I mean-
nitty gritty work. It's so
but we don't want
the
to hire
ironic truth that we
right?
really have to look. We do have to look at ourselves, but we are the best guide.
Well, how do we find you? We know that we're going to have information on the podcast,
Yes.
descriptions and things, but how can we find you? I know you also have a fantastic podcast where you're digging in deeper to this work. So tell us about
I
that.
am digging into braver. Let's talk about what we don't want to talk about, which I love that you brought the whole issue of executive coaching today. I think it's really important. So my podcast is called The Leaders Podcast, The Leaders Table and podcast. And so I invite you to become a listener. I am just getting rolling on this year. The other way is my website. I just totally recrafted it. My About Me will share with you more about my story and why I'm here.
Yes.
And you can email me, Diana, at dianamurphycoaching.com. I keep 0 inbox email and love being in conversation with people to help to answer any questions they might have from this.
Oh, I love that. And I really do hope that our listeners that are, whether you're in the car or whether you're at your desk having lunch and listening to this podcast, whether you're a new leader, an aspiring leader, or an entrepreneur, I hope that you are able to take away these key nuggets from Diana, from the work that she's continuing to do, how she's helping, all of us kind of grow forward, if you will.
Yes.
And I'm so excited that we were able to have this conversation today because a lot of stories are, hey, here's what I've done and here's what I've built and look how successful it is. But I love today that we talked about the things that people tend to not want to talk about.
Yes, but it gets us there. It really does. And let us grow and aspire and suffer less.
What great words. Well, to our listeners who have joined us, thank you so much for joining us today with Diana Murphy to learn more about what coaching can do to grow us all. You can subscribe to our podcast by going to www.aspiretobe.co. And as always, I challenge you as you go throughout your day to aspire to be, dare to become. You might just surprise yourself. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on our next episode.